Hey, welcome to As the World, where today we're talking about things they taught me. And this is a segment all about the people who, well, taught me a thing or two. One of the most influential people in my life is somebody that I never met. His name was Vern Taylor. He was my great grandfather, and he died when my father was 10 years old of a heart attack. But I lived in that man's shadow my entire life. There's not a single person in my hometown who was old enough to know Vern Taylor that didn't have a story about him. How hard he worked, how hard of a man he was, how hard to get along with he was, but also there wasn't a person that ever disrespected him. There's one story in the news paper about my great grandfather, and it was the day of the great Menden, Michigan fire. A big vat of lard that was rendering caught on fire. It was initially just a very small fire, and then quickly it became a massive fire that engulfed most of Main Street. And one of the stories that goes along with that was Vern Taylor losing his jacket and his gold watch because he hung up his jacket and put his watch in his pocket because he didn't want to lose it, and put it in a building really far from the fire, and he rushed in to go help fight the fire. And in the process of fighting that fire, well, they didn't fight it very well. The fire engine got stuck in the river. They couldn't get water to it, and it just raged out of control. The next closest fire departments were available by rail, but they took, several hours to get mobilized and to the town at that period. And so the town was mostly a loss, including his gold watch and his jacket. But Vern Taylor, he just, like I said, put a shadow over my life. Anytime I'd use a wheelbarrow on the farm, somebody would be like, your great grandfather, he built wooden sides and would carry 3 times as much in that. Or he'd get up early in the morning, he'd work his mules all day until they absolutely wouldn't move. He'd shoot them with a shotgun to make them move a little bit more, and once they finally absolutely gave up, that's the only time he'd ever think about using a tractor. Or the story of him, he bought a bunch of property out in by Phoenix, Arizona, and they were rental properties, and he lived in Menden, Michigan, and if there was a problem, he'd work all night getting all of his chores done, get in his car, drive all the way to Phoenix, Arizona, fix the problem, drive all the way back to Michigan without ever sleeping. Like I said, he was a hard man. And one of the things that I learned that my grandmother repeated all the time that he would say is, anything worth doing is worth doing right. There's no reason ever to do something other than to do it correctly. It drove me nuts because I always thought I was doing things correctly. My grandma would have me wash windows on her house, and sure enough, not good enough. Or she would have me sweep the sidewalk, and I'd sweep it for half an hour. It didn't matter. She'd find one thing, 3 things wrong, and she'd be like, "Your great grandfather used to say, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. So you keep working until it's done." You know, and that kind of lesson, while super annoying at the moment, that sticks with you, and you continue to bring that on with you as you go. Now, one of the big regrets that I have is that I never got to meet my great grandpa. But I do look forward to seeing him, you know, in eternity, and getting to know him and seeing if he really was as hard of a man as he said he was. And so I look forward to that. But the things they taught me be strong, be hard, persevere, and finally, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. Thank you very much. This is Things They Taught Me. Yeah, it is World.